And
I
then
see.
my mom, she had, my stepdad found her dead when she was 44 in bed, and she was still actively drinking and an alcoholic, and she just died one night when I was 21 years old.
Wow. That is crazy. Such seems like everything was so, I don't know, it sounds like kind of sudden in a way. And you wake up and you have all that shame and regret, and then you have to apologize and just all that whole thing, continue the same cycle. It gets exhausting for sure for everyone, not just the alcoholic. And
Yeah,
so,
for everyone. Yeah,
yeah.
sorry.
So what? So that's a perfect example, honestly, because I experienced that kind of thing all the time, where it was like, as soon as I got over the false or like the empty apologies that I would give, once they like forgave me, I would just be like, all right, well, I'm good now. I can go back.
One of the paramedics, who were fantastic, they said, on the good side is that you're pretty drunk, but if I hadn't been drunk, I wouldn't have crashed my car.
That's true.
Right?
I
I don't know why I crashed. Maybe I passed out. I don't know. I missed the curve in the road.
This is Rock Bottom with Ryan. No sugarcoating, no filters. The pain, the chaos, the truth. No bullshit. Just recovery.
Before we jump into today's episode, I want to take a moment to thank one of our incredible sponsors here at Rock Bottom with Ryan, Megan Haynes Counseling. Megan is a licensed therapist in Oregon and a woman in long-term recovery who truly understands what it's like to rebuild your life. She specializes in helping women who are sober curious, navigating trauma, substance use, anxiety, and major life transitions. Whether you're questioning your relationship with alcohol, looking for support in recovery, or just tired of feeling stuck, Megan creates a safe, judgment-free space to help you move forward. She also offers recovery coaching, including her 12-week sobriety program, along with free resources like her Sober Curious Guide and 7-day Gray Area Reset. Check out at Megan J. Haynes on Instagram, and if you're ready to make a change, send her a message today. Your next chapter could start with one conversation with Megan Haynes. Enjoy this episode. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Welcome to another episode of Rock Bottom with Ryan. I'm here with Leslie Patricia. How are you doing today?
I am great. How are you, Ryan?
Great. I'm great. Really excited to be able to talk to you today and hear about your story. I know you wrote a book that I really want to hear all about, and all about you being an author and what inspired that. And as you know, initially, I think I reached out mainly because I saw on your page that you mentioned some of the things that I could really resonate with, and that my listeners, I think, would find really interesting. You talk about sobriety, talk about childhood trauma survivor, which something I went through. It's just, and you're, like we just discussed, you're going on 9 years of sobriety, which to me, that is incredible and inspiring. So, I mean, that's crazy. But I just, I'm at about 22 months coming up here.
Wow.
And I just,
well, congratulations.
Thank you. And that feels kind of like an eternity. I mean, I can notice time going by a little faster now, but, when I hear about anything more than like 3 years, I'm just like, I never believed people like that when I first came into the rooms, but now it's like, I can believe them because life is that much better sober. So,
Yeah. I remember when I couldn't go 9 days. It's crazy. I'm here.
yeah.
I would have never thought it.
I know the small bouts of sobriety I had that lasted maybe a day or two, or 9 days, or 30 days at one point was my record. I was miserable during those times, and sometimes you just got to give it a chance. But
Yeah, early sobriety is not easy.
yeah, no, it's definitely not. But yeah, but here we are, though, talking about it years later. So tell me a little bit about, first and foremost, I like to ask my guests, sober date exactly, and then like drink or drug of choice, where you're from, some of the basics.
Okay, well, it was October 31st, 2017 is my sober date. And alcohol, beer mostly, but I would drink anything. I would do drugs if they were around. I wasn't really picky. Anything to numb myself. I'm originally from London, Ontario, but I live in Ottawa now. Yeah.
Okay. So definitely beer, alcohol was the one that took you down, but kind of like myself, you're open to other things if they came around, and
Definitely.
saying no
Definitely.
is not the common trait.
Well, and your judgment's so great when you're drunk.
I know, exactly. It's like, yes, I will snort that. I don't know what it is, but
I don't know, but it's probably really good for me.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to hear about everything you're doing today. But let's start hearing about the early years of Leslie and like hear about what life was like growing up, and maybe tell me about your family dynamic, some of the
Okay.
basic like details that stand out, and also if you're comfortable sharing some of the childhood trauma that
Yeah.
really you think had an impact, definitely feel free, and I'll just sit back and listen.
All right. I'll just babble. So I grew up in London, like I said, and both of my parents, I actually have a chapter in my book about them because I felt like they deserved a shout out. They both grew up in abusive homes. My dad was sexually abused by his dad. And yeah, my grandfather was a psychopath. He raped all his children. He abused my grandmother. He even moved in one of his mistresses and made my grandmother serve them. Now, we're going back to like the 1940s, and she was a nurse, and she eventually left him. She called the police, and back then, the police always really sided with men.
Yeah.
But she was pretty tough, and she told me the story that she was working at the hospital, and she had called the police on him, and he had been arrested, and back then there was no little hospital in the jail. He had swallowed open safety pins so he could be transported to her hospital, and his throat had been all torn apart, and he was calling her name. She said it was the most eerie fucking thing she had ever seen.
Jeez.
So then he actually ended up committing suicide when I was about 3 years old. And then my grandmother had formed AA in London and became a huge advocate. But then, of course, my dad, he didn't really have a shot with knowing how to parent. He meets my mom, who had been molested by her dad. Come from a long line of alcoholics and molesters. Some people are doctors. I get this, but
Yeah, I suffered
then
from the trauma as a child myself, so like this is really intense to hear. This is the first not one of the first times
okay.
I've heard about this kind of thing on the podcast, so I'm glad we're finally addressing it. So it's good.
Well, it's important because they met and they didn't know how to parent, let alone be adults. But obviously they gravitated towards each other. Then alcohol came in the mix, and it was just my childhood was just a hot mess. I suffered every type of abuse that you can imagine from my dad. My mom had multiple suicidal attempts. She would
Jeez.
be gone for months, and my dad told me that she was trying to quit smoking, but it had turned out that she had tried to kill herself. My dad was a mean alcoholic, and he did things to his daughters that a father shouldn't.
So that generational thing kind of was poured onto him, and he poured it onto you guys, like, and didn't try to change the cycle.
He, so he and my mom end up getting divorced when I was around 13, and he actually got sober. And so when they got divorced, they gave us a choice, who we wanted to live with. And I was like, my mom. For whatever reason, my sister stayed, and she went through shit that, I only visited sometimes. He met a woman who was also an alcoholic, but they ended up quitting drinking. And he actually apologized, and he went to CAS on his own when he was raising my sister. So he did finally, come clean about it. And
Wow.
but damage was done, and
But as a physical, emotional, possibly sexual,
all
yeah.
of it. Yeah. So saying that, my
Sorry.
mom, she met a man who was a drug addict and alcoholic, so my world as a teenager was just floating between the two homes. I found a job at a summer camp I could escape to, but but I'm introduced to alcohol there. And of course, it's like, this is amazing, and I really linked it to these people I met at this camp to alcohol. And it just formed this, I just found it was the first time I ever felt I belonged somewhere. And of course, that's like, I started drinking heavily at 16. And then I'd come back from camp and just chaos between the two homes. And then what I don't really talk about in the book, but I'm thinking about revising it, is I end up pregnant by 19, which is no shocker, to a guy that was abusing me, and ended up getting away from him. And then I met another guy who was super safe. We moved to Ottawa. We have another son, but I just repeated the cycle. And then him and I got divorced, of course. And then I'm with my husband now, who's a great guy and super supportive, but he didn't know how to handle me. Over the years, the alcohol just became this, I'm fine, where, my sister was victim. I was like, I'm not a victim. I'm fine. None of it affected me. I'm this strong person that can just plug through life. And I was really very a functioning alcoholic. I was going to work. I was pretending, I would dabble in fitness my whole life, and people thought I was this fitness person. But then I'd get home and I would easily down 12 beer, and then wake up hungover, regret, never going to do that again, do the stupidest things when you're drunk. And my kids are watching all this. They're watching all this. And I was just, it was a ticking time bomb. It was just, and in the last few years, you could really feel it. I was becoming a mess. I mean, you don't go through that as a child. But the thing is, I've always gone to therapist. I have always sought help. I've always found that important. And right before my car accident, I was actually seeing a therapist we were working on harm reduction. But
So, childhood, just to dive back a tiny bit. So,
yeah,
just because I want to hear about your relationships now and like how that evolved. But like when you first started experimenting with it and stuff, were you looking at it as like something to do for fun, to socialize, or was it something that you were immediately just trying to numb what was going on at home?
I think at the time I would have told you just for fun. I mean, in grade 10, I showed up to a high school dance completely hammered, like walked in just a mess. My parents had to come get me. But, I think I was definitely numbing the pain of what was happening behind closed doors. My dad he was a scary guy when he was drinking. And, I could tell you stories that, I remember being kicked downstairs and him calling me a bitch and a whore. And, but he, it's so funny, but they would try to be this functional family. Like I have memories of us all sitting around on a Friday night watching movies, and we'd go camping, and it was just them trying so hard with what skills they didn't have this is what a normal family is supposed to look like. You're supposed
Yeah.
to. So I actually have some really cool memories, but we were like, my dad was in the trades. We had the hydro shut off all the time. We were poverty. He would drink his money away. But, on the flip side, he was a really kind guy, just so broken. But he would, when he became sober, he was so likable and down to earth, and he would give you the shirt off his back. He was just that guy. But then he ended up getting liver cancer in 2014, and it took him pretty
Jeez.
fast. Yet after 25 years of not drinking.
Wow. That is,
Yeah. And then
is-
my mom, she had my stepdad found her dead when she was 44 in bed, and she was still actively drinking and an alcoholic. And she just died one night when I was 21 years old.
wow. That is crazy. Such, seems like everything was so, I don't know, it sounded like kind of sudden in a way. Like, were you closer to
My
mother?
mom,
Yeah.
Yeah, my dad and I, obviously, we had a pretty shaky relationship in my teens. I would cut him off, and my mom and I were, she was my best friend when she was around, but that seems like an eternity ago, but she was just such a, just broken. So, and I think that's the real tragedy of both my parents. They both died alone, and their lives were just that. And they both were trying so hard, but it got them, So I think when my dad died, we found he had all these journals, and he was a hot mess. He didn't pay his taxes. He was broke all the time, but he wrote in these journals every single day. And I found in it, Lisa, my daughter was drunk again. There's, it was all these things about me being drunk, and that was pretty heartbreaking to read. But
Jeez,
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
so sorry. It's tough because it's like you saw them in a certain light and you witnessed these toxic relationships growing up, which kind of in turn seemed like drew you to them in a way. But then they pass away, and then you start to kind of realize there were certain things, certain aspects about them that weren't as dark as what you remember. And
yeah. No, I actually have, my opinion of them is fond. I've really worked through that. I've kind of separated the two, the brokenness of them and what made them do what they did to who was really underneath them.
yeah,
That's been a lot of work.
I bet.
But when he died, we were pretty close. I saw him the night before he died, and
Wow,
yeah.
that's
And
crazy.
both of them, I was with both of them the night before they both died kind of suddenly. And my last words to each of them was, "I love you." So
Wow.
yeah.
How so growing up and kind of when did your alcoholism really start to start getting to the point where people started to call you out on it, or you started to
Well,
realize
I think,
this is more of a problem?
I remember in my late 30s, I think up until then, because I'd gone through a messy divorce, but it was definitely in my late 30s, early 40s, I was making quite an ass of myself. I mean, saying that I destroyed my sister's wedding because I got so drunk. I went to another wedding that, the cringe factor of looking back sometimes is like, so I think it was always there, but I would say in my early 40s, late 30s, it really started to take hold. I remember having to call in sick because I had been up drinking by myself till 2 a.m. And then you wake up and you're crying and just the shame of it. And, my kids are watching this, and my youngest son is in recovery of a recovering drug addict. Almost 9 years. He's a week after me. He had a drug-induced seizure. And my other son is actually an addiction counselor. So my behavior, even though they say it didn't, and they have both forgiven me, my behavior shaped them on who they are. And that's not something, I talk about self-forgiveness all the time, and I try, but that's something that I'm not sure I will ever really get over, is that wishing I could have been a different mother.
Yeah. No, I know. And I'm sure that over the course of the last going on 9 years of sobriety, you guys had a lot of chance to process a lot of the stuff going on and that stuff that happened and why they felt the need to go that route
Yeah.
too. And so I'm sure you've had a lot of.
Yep. Yep.
So take me into what kind of things, what was a day in the life like, say at your worst 24-hour period?
Okay, so I would say the worst would be, I remember dreading Fridays because I knew Friday meant I was stopping at the liquor store. I lived in a little beach community, and you could walk to the store that had a little local beer store, which was probably the worst thing ever because I would go back to the days when you go rent a movie. I'd be like, got to get a movie and a 12-pack of beer, and then it would just be waking up Saturday morning, never remembering the movie, and God knows who I text and said what, and the beer would be gone, and I'd feel like shit. But then, the only way you get over that is you go buy some more beer on the Saturday and get yourself to feel better and do it all over, and then, come Sunday night, I'm making a deal with the universe and just help me get sober. I don't want to be like this. This is not who I want to be. But, it'd be like, hey, do you want to go out for a drink? It'd be like, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just going to have one. And I remember going into the LCBO and looking at the shelf going, I'm not going to buy a case. I'll just buy, a few tall cans, and then be like, it's just nonsensical when I think back to it. Yeah.
I know. The insanity of it. And
But,
yeah.
I was dry heaving every morning there was woods behind my house. I was dry heaving every morning in that last few years. And just crying and promising, just like the energy I spent on wanting to quit drinking.
Yeah.
If I'd use that energy for something else, it would be a different person sitting here.
Besides the dry heaving, I went through quite a bit, especially after benders and when things got really bad, which it happened more than one time, so I can't even specify when it was. But the dry heaving and feel like foam was coming out, and I feel like my face was starting to have vessels popped from the heaving. And did you suffer from a lot of withdrawal symptoms on top of
Yeah.
that? Yeah.
So, you mean when I finally quit?
Or just in general, waking
Yes,
up?
definitely.
Yeah.
My worst thing was the shakes. I could never, if I ever had to present anything, I'd have to put the paper down. Otherwise, it would just be this,
Yeah.
I could never, no. That was absolute headaches.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Shakes
lots
were
of, the
horrible
shakes were
for me.
number one. Yeah.
Yeah. Same,
and
I'd
those
get them
started,
after just a night or two, and then those started when I was
absolutely.
20 or something.
I
Yeah.
was going to say those I look back when I was working at those summer camps when I was 16, 17, and 18. I'd come home in the fall.
Yeah.
Be like, hey guys.
It's interesting how it affects some of our bodies differently.
It's scary.
I envied those people that could just wake up after a bender and just fully function. And here I am, I can't put my contact in.
I know. I remember trying to drink coffee. It was like, I'll just
Yeah.
wait for that because I'm going to be wearing this and not drinking it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. It was miserable, but yeah. So with
Miserable.
withdrawal symptoms, those are just another thing that I think about. That when I replay the tape, if I ever have a bad day, I'm like, that's the last thing I want to experience ever again. So
I have nightmares of that, actually. I think that's one of the many things that keep me sober. I remember I was at my cottage one night and I drank wine, like red wine. And the next day I was at a Tim Hortons and I had to walk out and I threw up red grossness, like this red pink. And it was just, here I am standing on the side of the road. It's like, this is who I am. This is what I've mounted to. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I went and drank that day.
Yeah.
Yeah, that wasn't enough.
Yep. I know. That's was that how many wake up calls kind of stand out looking back that should have been a time where you thought, hey, I should have stopped then. That was obvious enough. I mean, was there any other ones?
Yeah, my oldest son had some tough talks with me about how much my drinking had affected him. Right there. Your child's telling you, you need to stop, right there and then. My husband had tried. There were times that I remember having people over for dinner and I woke up the next day and I only remembered serving dinner. And I remember that was texting them going, hey guys. And they were like, it's okay. You were, I had been falling all over the place. Their kids were there. What, then should have been what are you doing?
Yeah.
But not enough. I don't know.
Yeah. No,
Had
I
a
know.
hold of me.
Yeah, and you wake up and you have all that shame and regret, and then you have to apologize and just all that whole thing, continue the same cycle. It gets exhausting for sure for everyone, not just the alcoholic.
Yeah, for everyone. Yeah. Sorry.
So what? So that's a perfect example, honestly, because I experienced that kind of thing all the time, where it was as soon as I got over the false or the empty apologies that I would give, once they forgave me, I would just be like, all right, well, I'm good now. I can go back to it.
Absolutely. You almost feel validated. It's like, well, they're not that mad about it.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll just keep going. Yeah.
Yep. And we just don't learn our lesson. But so take me into the final days and
Okay.
what led to finally quitting, and then we'll go into
So
kind of today.
I had the day off work because I was going to get my passport because I was going on a trip to the States. And I went out to lunch with a friend and we had a couple of glasses of wine there. And then I actually was going to an NHL hockey game that night with my son where we had beer, much more than I clearly realized. And then I drove home. And, I think about that, and it wasn't like I think most normal people have a couple of drinks and think, should I be driving? That never even that stuff didn't enter my mind. It just had such a hold of me that it was just what I did. And then luckily I had dropped my son off and he had actually asked me not to drive home, but I was only 10 minutes down the road. So I said, I'm fine, I'm fine. And then next thing I knew, I woke up and my car was upside down in a tree. There was a curve in the road that I missed and I bounced into a ditch and my car flipped about 4 to 5 times and landed in a tree. And I woke up kind of suspended upside down with blood dripping in my face. The lights were kind of flashing and you kind of freak out. So the only way out was the sunroof. So I actually punched it through the glass, broke my hand, got out, and then I could see a car sitting up on the road and I could hear sirens. And I thought maybe I could just flip my car and drive home. Yeah. And well, that didn't work. So, you're in absolute shock. And then the ambulance and police showed up and and I was just sitting there and I said, hey. And the guy one of the paramedics says, holy shit, we thought you were dead. And when I saw my car later, how I ever lived through that, it was completely totaled. The person that called 911 that saw my car didn't come down because they figured it was probably somebody dead in the car and they had already had PTSD from something else. So they were expecting me to be dead. So they put me in the stretcher.
Wow.
I go to the hospital. I see my husband show up and he's talking to the police. And I'm like, okay. And then I asked to go to the bathroom and I went in and my face was completely broken. Like it was just, I'd broken the orbital bone. My shoulder, one of my shoulders was broken. My hand was broken in 2 spots. My ribs were broken. I had a severe concussion that they actually thought the skull had gone into my brain. They had to do all these MRIs.
Huh.
Then the police came in, gave me a breathalyzer, which was not good. And I actually said, I'm fucked. And I know I said that because when I had to go to court, that's what they were reading out everything. And they actually read that out. I was like, and then had to go to the hospital for the night. Went home the next day, which was Halloween. And then, life just kind of had to tell my kids that I had crashed my car and that luckily I hadn't killed anyone. Cause that was, that's haunting to me is that, you watch the news all the time and drunk driver kills a family and I really live with that could have been me, and my kid's story would have been, well, our mom is in prison for killing a family or herself or,
Yeah.
that's heavy. That's, and and in the hospital, my husband said to me, I don't know how to make alcohol okay for you. And I said, you can't. And I promised there that I wouldn't drink again. And the cops were actually really surprised that he even stayed. They said quite often spouses will walk in and turn right back out. So luckily he's a good guy and stuck around. Then I had to tell my kids and, I'd have a breathalyzer put in my car. I'd already been working with a therapist, as I mentioned, for harm reduction. So I called her literally 2 days after and said, so this happened. And she said, take it as a good sign. The universe just told you that harm reduction doesn't work for you. It's a black and white answer for me. There, that was under harm reduction that I crashed my car drunk.
Yeah.
And I had to, that was it. Those were the darkest days of my life was, the thought that I could have killed someone that night. Just,
Yeah.
you know,
And you almost killed yourself. I'm sure they told you I had a few freak accidents when I was drinking, not in the car technically. I got a severe, well, they call it an excessive DUI, where I blew a .34, which is ridiculously intoxicated. And, my first thought was I could have killed somebody, and here I was just driving 3 blocks to get home. That was all I was driving. And they just hit me. And I was like, and I didn't even argue it. I just said, yeah, I'm intoxicated, take me to jail. And this is bound to happen. But I just think of all the other times I drove intoxicated or on drugs or this or that or blacked out, don't remember parking my car. And I'm like, had I killed somebody, I don't think I'd ever be able to live with myself. So it's just
no, absolutely not. Yeah, I remember checking my phone the next day like it was a crime scene. Sometimes it'd be like, did anyone get killed last night? Was that me? It's ridiculous,
Did they mention to you that the fact that you like kind of semi walked away from the accident in a way? I mean, you broke a lot of bones, you had injuries, but like, did they mention to you that like if had you not been intoxicated, your body may have tensed up and
Yep.
may have been injured more?
They actually did say that. One of the paramedics who were fantastic, they said, on the good side is that you're pretty drunk, but if I hadn't been drunk, I wouldn't have crashed my car.
That's true. That's true. That's true.
Right.
I
I don't know why I crashed. Maybe I passed out. I don't know. I missed the curve in the road.
Yeah. I'm just fortunate that you are alive to share the story, and let's find out about like how that was a life-altering experience. What happened? What was early sobriety like? Did you change right away? Did you have any kind of like slip-ups early on? How did that go?
So I was off because I was so injured. I was off work for about 6 months, I think. And I had a number for Smart Recovery for a while, which is, I don't know if you have heard of Smart Recovery, right? So about 3 days after my accident, I called finally, and I talked to this nice man named Ron. And I said, I want to go, but here's what happened. I can't drive. And he said, I'll come get you. And the following weeks after the accident, my face went through a lovely shade of yellow and purple, and like it was morphing. I'd go into the grocery store and I looked pretty horrendous. So this guy comes and picks me up. He's an older guy. My arm's in a sling. I'm not talking. I'm just like, and he starts telling me that he's been sober for 25 years and that he woke up one morning and his car was flipped over in the front lawn and he had no idea how that had happened. So I go to the Smart Recovery meeting. I don't say a word. I just bawl my eyes out the whole entire time. And he took me home. And then the following week, another guy picked me up. I went, didn't say a word, bawled my eyes out. And I kept going back. And then every week I would start talking a little bit. And then the same time, I have to go see a parole officer once a month, whose name was also, Leslie. And then and I was expecting it to be, this big dude lecture me for an hour. In our first meeting, she hugs me because all I did was cry and think about suicide. That was the first few months of my sobriety. It was just alone in my thoughts. I had a severe concussion. You can't do anything except sit there and think about, this is who I became. This, like you're suddenly forced to look at yourself, and it was awful. It was not okay. But then I think between the Smart Recovery and the parole officer, and then I started to go see a therapist, it just started like, it wasn't easy at first, but I knew I couldn't risk going backwards. I couldn't. Alcohol has me. It owns me, and then I finally started going out, and, I remember going to a friend's for dinner and I brought a bottle of fake wine and no one knew until the end of the night, and everyone just in shock, just So that first year, it's always that in shock. And I find that crazy because I'm the one that they were always talking about, like I find it like, everybody wants you to drink until you're like that person that, ruins the whole night. But then when you go, well, I don't drink anymore. They're like, what? You're going to be so boring now.
Yeah.
It's so ridiculous to me, so that first year was tough but I stuck with it. And no, I never went back. I never slipped up. I never, that night haunts me. And I think, you can only, I try to be better every day, but that's in my past. It's never going away. I was a drunk driver. And I could have and I should have died, and I had a friend who had cancer at the time who's a saint, and she did die. And I think, what would it all be for if I just went and threw it all away?
Yeah.
What would that be?
Due to drinking. Yeah. Yeah. Not to mention having kids they could have lost to. And it's just,
Yeah, and I don't want that to be their story either. I was given a second chance, and for them, like I get to rewrite their story. That their story isn't mom's a drunk and she died drinking and killing herself. They get to have a better story, and that's what drives me to not drink. And plus, I don't like it anymore. After a certain time, you just start to not even like the smell of alcohol, which is crazy.
yeah. No, exactly. What were some of like the first things like early sobriety? As you just mentioned, it's really tough, especially for me. It was like the first 90 days this time around. I mean, I noticed things start to get easier after like the first couple of weeks. I just noticed like improvements, but I would say it took about 90 days, 6 months,
Yeah.
something like that to really come to my own. And so, like, what were some of the things you addressed? Because you suffered a lot of trauma as a child and a
Yeah.
lot, like, what were some of the things that you really tried to tackle?
It really came down to the self-loathing that I had for myself. You grow up in a home like that, being, I was, I was never really patted on the back much, so when you're treated like that, I just had this deep self-loathing that I still fight with. That I really had to tackle. So I think when I drank, it really kind of, you know, numb that feeling. When I drank, I felt fun. And everyone's prettier when they're drunk, right? You just feel I felt better. So I really had to like try to find a way to be okay with me, and that was really my main focus. And I think I really discovered that to be okay with me, and this is just me, I can't look in the mirror and tell myself that I love me 100 times. Affirmations are great and all, but I realized I had to start doing stuff to get my worth, So I think January of the next year I started training for a half marathon. I got on the treadmill on January 1st and my accident I was about 2 months out from my accident. So I started training for that. And then my friend had cancer. I saw this ride to conquer cancer. So I signed up for it. I didn't even have a bike, and I had a bike made. And I showed up to this 2-day cycle, over 200 kilometers over the 2 days. Had no idea what I was doing. So I did that, did the half marathon. Then I trained for a marathon. I think I just kept trying to, I'm also very ADHD. So like which is what happens when you grow up in that kind of home. So then I went and became a personal trainer, and then I became a nutritionist. Now I'm working on becoming a yoga trainer. I think for me to have that self-acceptance, I need to like do stuff. I need to just try to, be better, and that's what I think I realized in the early days, is that I hadn't really done much. I thought I was a good person. If you had asked me 10 years ago, it's like, I'm a nice person. I'm a
Yeah.
great person.
Yeah.
But, I wasn't, I wasn't doing anything with my time. I had big hopes. I was dabbling in fitness, but nothing consistent, because I was either too hungover, or if it'd be like if I was supposed to work out and somebody's like, "Hey, you wanted beer?" I'd be like, "Yeah."
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah, I can relate to that. I always had like hobbies and things that I was interested in and all these entrepreneurial ideas and stuff, but things just wouldn't really come to fruition because alcohol and drugs would hold me back some way, shape, or form, and the distractions. And when you mentioned just now, like about ADHD and how that can just I feel like sometimes can develop just based on like your surroundings growing up and stuff.
For
Like,
sure.
I mean, I moved
Definitely.
around a ton as a kid and witnessed all these different relationships between my mother, my dad, and the people they ended up with. And I was just like,
Good.
how do I not have ADHD at this point?
Right.
So,
That's
yeah,
right. Like how
yeah,
your little brain is trying to factor in everything it's watching, and I'm sorry you had to go through all that.
yeah. It was just yeah, it was an interesting childhood, and like kind of like yourself, it's like I didn't really realize I was numbing myself the whole time until after, and I started to really kind of look at it. I'm like, wow, I wasn't really having fun when I was drinking after a while, so it must have been numbing some of those traumas. So finally, I had to address some of them, and there were traumas in adulthood too that I had to finally address, and it was just yeah. But I've now that it's been going on 2 years, things are improving for sure, but it's just in the moment we don't really notice it. So
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, you're doing great. I mean,
thank you.
you'll be at 9 years one day too.
Yay, I'm excited for it. But so take me into when did the idea of a book come out and what happened there? Have you always been kind of a writer and
Well,
it just finally you could just do it or
no, so the book is interesting because it actually, somewhere in that early sobriety, someone, and I don't remember where it came from, but it was journal, start writing down stuff. And that's actually what the book was. It was kind of my journal. I wrote out that night, the night that everything just absolutely changed. And then I wrote out stuff about my childhood, and as I'm writing this, I'm like, this is a story to be told. Like this is, just my parents' childhood. And I don't know if this would have helped me, but I think maybe when I was younger, if I had a chat with someone like me, I might have looked twice at my behavior. Like I just thought this might help someone hearing this. There's someone else out there that, like, look at you, like we have similar backgrounds, and it just became obvious to me that I needed to put my story out there. And so then it was like, all right, let's start. I started pretty easy. It's a pretty soft version of stuff that happened. I'm going to revise it this summer, actually. I think I didn't include my kids a lot in it. I kind of wanted to, protect them a little bit, but I think there's stuff I'd like to share. I don't really go into the accident that night. If I could stop one person from drinking and driving, that would be fantastic,
yeah.
because I don't think there's a lot of awareness out there about drinking and driving because, I had to attend these classes and
Yeah.
for drunk drivers, and it was crazy to me. It was booked every weekend for months and months and months. So everyone's doing it, and so many of the people in there were like blaming the system. It wasn't their fault, like
Yeah, never.
if I can have a couple of beers and drive, fuck you. You know what I mean? Like no one tells me how to drive in my day. It was a lot of that. So, so I just thought, you know what, the book I need to publish this and just to get it out there because
Good. Good. What was writing the book? Was it healing, painful, combination of both?
all of the above. Yes. Yes, it was especially the childhood part and the accident. Obviously it's like, it's always going to be something that is very emotional for me,
Yeah.
but
That was my next question is like what chapter was the hardest to write for you?
you know what? The first about the car accident, because that is it's not like I talk about it a lot. I don't, hi, I'm Lisa, I'm a drunk driver. And, you
Yeah.
know, you know what I mean? And,
Mhm.
the last chapter, I kind of talk about coming back to my inner child because, she wasn't really protected. And I think that's where it all kind of is just me drinking to try to soothe that child that that never felt safe. And I think then that's, it's funny. The front cover is me with a little girl and everyone thinks it's my daughter. And I don't have any daughters. It's me with me, like as a, like it's that little me. That's what it's supposed to be, is me embracing that inner child and trying to, I'm very spiritual about that stuff now. And I think just embracing her and thanking her for getting me to where I needed to be, because that's what we're doing, right? Like people like you and I were just, that version of us was trying to keep us safe, even though
Yeah.
their safe was crazy. We were just trying to, they kept us alive somehow. So I that's what the book really comes to, is just embracing that instead of hating her. I've really come to try to love her. That will be a lifelong thing for me.
Yeah, no, I understand. I feel like in sobriety, we just have a constant battle trying to forgive our past selves and trying to embrace them. And
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, we can't pretend nothing happened, but we can embrace it. You use it to learn, use it to, create a better future, but it still happened. And it's just really hard because we have so much animosity towards that version of ourselves.
Yeah. And I did a post about this a while ago, but it was about that. Would you erase that moment?
Yeah.
My rock bottom was pretty rock bottomish. Like some people, I find it crazy. Some people wake up one day and go, I'm not going to drink anymore and I'm going to try to be sober. Where mine was, I had to be flipped into a tree and almost die for me to go, so yeah.
Yeah. No, that's honestly, like, I talked to so many different people with different stories and backgrounds. And you're right. A lot of people do just say like, oh, I drank occasionally. I just thought I was having too many glasses of wine at night. And I just decided, I wasn't feeling good. So I just changed. But then there are people that just, lost everything or ended up with jail time or this or got into an accident. So everybody's rock bottom is relative, but some obviously are more
Absolutely.
extreme than others. It sounds like. So
Yeah. That's, I'm a kind of a big go big or go home kind of person, clearly.
yeah, but it sounds like you're going big in more positive ways now, and like
I am.
really
I've
starting to rock
really
your feet.
found, like fitness and just trying to, your body is your temple kind of thing. And I think just being a role model that way it all really comes down for me is I was given a second chance and I'm not letting that go. That's, and sometimes, not every day can be that, but when I feel like I'm in a rut, I kind of have to, you should be dead, like pick yourself up and keep going. And now I feel like I'm a kid in a candy store, because now it's like I want to do this and I want to do this and I want to do this. And, I'm in my 50s, sadly, but I have so much I want to do that sometimes it's reining me in a little bit, but it's good. It's, and that's, if I could tell anyone, that is just do it. Like, just, it's miserable in the beginning, but it certainly, I don't think you could get anyone who's been 9 years sober and say, God, I miss drinking and being hungover. You're 22 months and,
Yeah,
it's,
I appreciate life more than ever, and recovery's been great for me. Like, of course, I didn't like the first period where I'm still trying to, look at myself in the mirror without regret and just still shaking, basically, literally, figuratively, because I'm scared to get to know myself. And am I going to like myself? Are people going to like me? And so many things I was worried about, but everything turned out better. And sometimes you start to embrace, like if I'm an introvert at heart, I started to embrace that. And then it actually made me more comfortable in my own skin, so where I could
that's awesome.
start a podcast. So it's like,
well, it's great what you're doing. Like, it's
Thank you.
trying to make a difference. But you're right. It's getting to know yourself sober is like just, I just kind of remember sitting there going, do I knit? I don't know what to do. Like, cause I always had a drink in my hand. Always. It was like, I was like the guy off Trailer Park Boys,
Yeah, no, I know. Same. It's definitely, but I'm glad you channeled it into positive things, writing and fitness and you're still a part of Smart Recovery and all that? Or?
No, so that lasted about a year, and, and I love Smart Recovery, but for me, I came to a point where I didn't want to just sit around and talk about it all the time. I just felt like, and I knew that's when I considered myself completely sober when I stopped counting the days, kind of, even though I still kind of count the days, but in that early sobriety, you're like, wow, I am 9 days sober. I
Yeah.
am 19 days sober, but I just found there were some people there because in smart recovery, there's people still using. And for me, that was hard to be around a little bit. But, they're all amazing people. And I think about going back sometimes. I look it up and we'll see. But I just got to the point where I have a therapist I go to all the time,
Yeah.
kind of attached to their leg, and
That's good.
and I have found ways to, much more positive ways to deal with grief. And, because I've had moments in the last 9 years that the old me would have like driven straight to the beer store. And,
Yeah. Yeah.
like when I found out my friend had cancer, I went and got a 12 pack. When I found out I had to put my dog down, I went and got a 12 pack, and I certainly have had moments like that. So it was trying to find more better ways to deal with all that. And yeah, it's just, but I have, so I don't know what I'm
Yeah.
trying to say. I'm just babbling.
No, not at all. It's really interesting. And like, I have a couple more questions about the book because I just love how your perspectives changed. And I love that you said that you're planning to kind of revise it a little bit because I know as time goes on, you start to think of more things you kind of wanted to add or maybe just weren't ready for at the time. So I think that's great. What message do you hope readers carry with them long after they finish the book?
I think, and I think I already kind of said it, but you know, because like I said, it like for me, it was self-loathing, and we want to really hate that person. Like I look at the old me and the way I behaved, but I think we need to embrace that person. We need to forgive and move on, because if you don't forgive that person, and that's the person that, like I said, that's the person that got you sitting here, me sitting here, and that's the message I want, is just to try to, love every moment of your journey, because without all that, I don't know if I would be who I am now. And not that I think I'm this incredible person, but I like where I am, and I don't think without her I would be here. So that's my message in the book is, this is cliche, but if I can do it, like if I can get sober and forgive myself, like I was the drunkest, I was the town drunk. Like, let me tell you, I was the one walking into work and people, after a staff party and people going, I was the
Yeah.
one that ruined weddings and almost destroyed my marriage. And, I was a sloppy, icky, and I want someone to read it and say, wow, if she can do it, then I can do it. And I
I
don't,
love that.
right?
Yep.
And trying to forgive that person, I think, is because as long as you hate that person, I don't think you can heal in a natural way.
So true. And you just put it all in perspective as to why I love doing this show and talking to people like yourself and having guests on is like, I want listeners out there, especially ones that are struggling, to say, like, if she can do it, if he can do it, then I have a chance, and that's what I want them to think. So,
Yeah,
what
that's
adv-
awesome.
what advice would you give to listeners out there? You kind of gave some already, but based on your struggles, everything you experienced, my final question is like, what advice would you give to listeners out there who are struggling, sober curious, just want some advice from somebody who's been through it, like yourself? What would
You
you
know,
say?
yeah, my best advice is to just, I'm allowed to swear, right? I think I already have. It's just to fucking do it. Like you got to pull off the Band-Aid, and, don't be like me. That's my advice. Don't be a Leslie. Don't crash your car, and
Be a
because
Leslie. I'm titling the episode that.
don't be a Leslie, because I can't undo that. And I said that earlier. I can try to outdo it, but I can't. Like every time the news comes on and I see, oh, drunk driver, there is so much shame in me. So anyone that is fighting this, like I used to like beg every morning. I was dry heaving. I was begging, I don't know, the universe to help me, to help me. I didn't want to be that person. And I was right. Like this side is so much better. And my only regret is that I didn't do it earlier. Like my son, who's a recovering drug addict, he did it at 23. You know, like, I wish I had done it at 23. You know, that's my advice.
Incredible.
Do it. Just do it.
Just do it. Don't wait till another 10 rock bottoms takes place. Just do it. Yeah,
Yeah.
just get it
Yeah.
going.
Rock
And
bottom's not a fun place to be.
and
Unless
what?
you're on your show, then it's a great place to be.
Yeah, there we go. That's like the best thing a guest ever said. Thank you. So why did you call it? Last question. Why did you call it "Keep Showing Up"? So what's the meaning behind that? I know I hear that a lot, but
Showing
what
up
was it?
anyways. Yeah.
Showing up anyways. I mean, showing up anyways.
Because I think you can relate to this. When I was drinking, I never really had to deal with anything, you know, until the next day. But because every time that it was like, if I, like I said, you know, found out my friend was dying of cancer, I'd go on, instead of dealing with it, I would just drink it, you know, and then feel like crap the next day and feel worse. So, and in that early sobriety, you're all of a sudden introduced to emotions that you have to sit in and not numb them with alcohol. Like you have to suddenly show up in a sober, very clear way, instead of just opening a bottle and putting it to the side. So, you know, so when I started training for stuff, it really came to I don't feel like doing this, but you know, you have to, you have to do it. You have to show up anyways. And just when I was writing it, it was, you know, showing up for that little girl that didn't want to deal with it, that just tried to keep me safe for years. So now I show up for her. That's kind of where it came from.
I love it. It can mean so many things, you know, just
Yeah.
like in recovery, we hear like showing up anyways. Sometimes I would hear it as like, you know, just on a bad day, don't drink, you know, still go to the meetings, still do this, still bring out your best self that day or whatever. And it can stand for parenting, friendship, relationships. So it's
And
such a
anything.
good title. So,
And even sometimes if showing up means lying in bed, because that's what you need. You know, like showing up can mean and look so different for everyone. Like I don't want to tell people that they have to do stuff when they're, you know, showing up looks very different. It just show up for your body and your brain and what it needs. That's what I meant.
exactly. No, I love that. I love that. Well,
Yeah.
and a couple other, just one other question.
Yeah.
Do you want to shout out your, like, can you flash the book on camera? I'll pop it up on the screen, and then like how people can reach you and all that
Okay.
stuff.
Showing up anyways. It's on Amazon, or you can find me on Instagram at Leslie Patricia Lohr /author. That's where you find me.
Awesome.
But it is going to be. I am in the middle of revising it, so it's going to get a little bit spicier.
Okay.
Because I've never written a book, and I wasn't sure if people were ready for it. And this community that I've had the honor to be introduced to needs, I think, it needs to be told. Like the car crash, the suicidal stuff, the spicy middle, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
The clawing back out is what needs to be told. And I don't think I really did that.
That's incredible. Like I'm gonna check it out myself,
Oh, thanks.
and I'm so glad that you're gonna kind of make some additions to it too. That I'm sure things are even becoming more vivid the more time goes on. So I just think that's really incredible. And is there like an excerpt or a quote from the book you'd like to share to top off the episode, or any kind of quote in general? I ask every guest to share a quote, but I figured, I'm talking to an author, maybe there's something you want to share from it, or just a couple sentences. Yeah. No, like I can edit out this part where if you're looking for it.
Yeah, sure.
So I'm putting you on the spot, I realize.
I need my old lady glasses on. You know, it's at the very end. I'm going to get, you know, I'm the person that always reads the back of the book so I know what's happening. Now when I wake up each day, I do not feel like I'm starting over. I feel like I'm starting again with her beside me. And whatever comes next, I know this much. I will keep showing up anyways.
Love that. Is that the last part of the book?
That is, I just gave away the ending of the book.
Well, spoiler alert.
Don't even have to read it now.
I'll throw a spoiler alert up. Thank you so much. It's been so nice talking to you and hearing you be vulnerable, because I mean the conversation at the beginning obviously was just so much like darkness that you grew up with, and so many things that you channeled into something positive to help others now with your book and with everything you're doing. So I'm incredibly grateful and obliged to have you on the show. So thank you so much.
No, Ryan, I am honored and grateful to talk to you.
All right. Thank you so much. I'll talk to you a bit later.
All right. Thanks.
Rock Bottom with Ryan. No bullshit, just recovery.